up like leaning on yourself because maybe somehow you felt that asking for help means that you're burdening others, so you just kind of internalize that and you're used to just dealing with your stuff alone. Is this who you are, or is this who you had to become because you never felt safe?
This is essence. Ooh, this is the essence.
Hello, hi, I hope couple. My name is Vanshika Mariuti, and Essence is also my name. So, the question that I have today is who you are, who you truly are, or is who you say that you are, who you are, or who you had to become because something happened to you along the way in this road of life. So, yeah, that is my question. So, I want us to take a journey, and dear Lord, I pray that I am a good teacher today. So, I want us to take a journey, and here's where we begin. So, when we're born, like there we are, I'll call that self. There we are, self. I hope it's clear. And when we are born the programming within us of being creative. We are born with the ability to be compassionate to others and not just be egotistical and just going after just our ways and not considering others. Which brings us to we are born with an encoder of being considerate to others and not just getting our way at the expense of others. When we're born with the ability of loving ourselves, loving others, and even loving God. When we're born, we're so innocent and childlike. We have such a childlike wonder. Um, especially like when you're little, when you're young, before the dilution of the programming that we go through. You have these big dreams of who you're gonna be before you're, you know, started to be told like, be realistic, or is that even really possible? When we're born, we are born like content. We have that thing within us that we can be content with what we have, not complacent or content. We're born intelligent. Others are very artistic. They can draw very well, they can write songs very well, they're such a good writer. Like I said before, big dreams, very big dreams before they are diluted and you're programmed and you're told what you can be is these mainstream careers that there are, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we're programmed with that, and all these great things, you cannot exhaust them. And then somewhere along the way, what happens to us? Trauma. And trauma begins to cover up those things. What happens to you is maybe you're neglected by your parents, all right? But on top of every other thing that starts to cover up on the very things that you're made with. You, somewhere along the line, went through rejection. Somewhere along the line, you're abandoned by your family, by whomever. You are abandoned. On top of that, you have to deal with generational patterns. And when we talk about like generational patterns, especially in like the Christian community, we just think, oh, it's just like something spiritual. Generational patterns, they exist like as emotional loops and mental loops that we have to deal with, and then they are usually enforced mostly by our environments that we grow up, that we find ourselves in. What happens? Another thing that could happen to you is you get abused physically or emotionally, mentally, sexually. My heart goes out to anyone who's ever been abused sexually. You end up falling in the hands of someone who abuses you and takes advantage of you spiritually. Somewhere along the line, you undergo through betrayal by your friends, by your family, whomever. And all these things, a lot of these things, and I can't list them all, they are a lot. They are a lot. So what happens is, like, we're born, right? We're creative, intelligent, compassionate. We have the ability to love. We have all these big dreams within us. So what happens is trauma. What happens? You're abused. You go through that. So what happens mostly is that we don't, at the time that they are happening, we mostly don't have capacity to deal with them. So what happens is, if like you underwent rejection, if like you are abandoned, if you are abused, something happened to you, what happens is, because you don't have capacity and understanding to deal with that, what kicks in is a false self, because your real self cannot handle, well, all those things that happen. There's a front that comes, which is a false self, which I call it a false self because I don't know, maybe lack for a better word, but it's really like our defense mechanism or our survival instincts. They kick in because now they front as ourselves. But the real self is somewhere protected by this front because it does not have the capacity yet to have to deal with all that trauma. So how this for self fronts itself sometimes, it's people pleasing. Yes, people pleasing. You are abandoned and somehow you thought that being good. I know that being a good person is a bad thing. It's not, but sometimes, you know, we're being good or being nice to people so that maybe we can get the validation that we never got, or um somehow you think that maybe if I do good, I'm not gonna be abandoned and I'm not gonna be left. Another way that that shows up is hypersexuality, and even the opposite of that could happen, especially when you've gone through like abuse. Sometimes it's like you're participating in illicit sex, but question is, do you really enjoy it? Are you trying to medicate a wound? Because what happens is when you're abused, there's something that is taken from you. There's a power that is taken from you, and you're left feeling powerless. And in the attempt to get that power back, which is it's very elusive, you don't get your power back. You end up like hypersexual, engaging in a lot of like sexual activities. You could be like addicted to porn or masturbation or just sex in itself with whichever gender. Yeah, the other way that the front shows up is abrasive, which this one what I mean by abrasive is like someone who's not considerate at all, or they are extremely rude or extremely arrogant. Extremely arrogant. They are extremely arrogant, and they don't care who gets hurt along the way of them getting what they want. Like, yeah. And yeah, very rude, being very rude. And it's just there's an appearance of like strong by being abrasive. There's an appearance of being strong, but there isn't strength there. It's like somewhere along the line, maybe you were deeply hurt and you raised this very high wall that people cannot penetrate so that you don't get hurt. I was very rude. I was very rude. I've heard people tell me like, hey, kuna kitu uliniambia. Nikabaki nikifikiria, and I was like, yeah, yep, I know that I did. I know that I did. Another way these false self fronts is you end up become abusive and manipulative. So at first you are the victim of abuse. At first you are the victim of nah. I don't want to use that word. Anyway, so let's just say abuse. You're the victim of abuse, and now you end up being the one victimizing others. You control them financially. You use finances to kind of have a sense of control over someone. Others end up using spirituality to control. Nasikia God said, and God did not say. When God did not say. Sometimes it's, yeah, end up abusing others emotionally, mentally, and all others. The other way is you end up like in the state of always being high performing and high achiever, and everything is a competition. Everyone, you want to compete with everyone, which I, I think competition in itself is healthy, but if you're constantly having to compete with people around you, there's something wrong. Because if I am to compete, I personally will have to compete with myself in regards to like my path and my purpose. But if I'm constantly being like, oh, we only buy V8, I need to buy what other car? What other bigger car? You know, like yeah, and also like you strive to make a lot of money because you want to be valued, because you've never been valued without, which getting money is not a bad thing, and being valued because you have money is not a bad thing. But when you tie your identity to like money and performing highly, it's like when you don't have it, then your very identity is shattered. The other way that it shows up is like your avoidance. You're very avoidant and you never show vulnerability. It could be that maybe um, growing up, you're like were never confrontational or something. So if maybe there's an argument, or if maybe there's a disagreement, or if there's a fight, it's like it's never talked about. You know, you just kind of have to go through life as though it never happened. So sometimes you end up being like avoidant, and because confrontation to you would also mean that maybe like a relationship breaks, or you're, something. And also avoiding vulnerability because maybe at a certain point you are vulnerable and you ended up being deeply, deeply hurt. And now you avoid vulnerability. The other way that it shows up is hyper independence. Hyper independence. You learned that nobody's coming to save you. I usually don't like that sentence that no one's coming to save you, because there's so much like survival that is in that sentence. Because sometimes it's like, what if I do all the work that I can do possible and it doesn't yield fruit? So what happens? I'm just on my own and I'm gonna die or something. So you grew up hyper independent, like at a very young age unafanya budget ya family, unaanza kufikiria how you're gonna save your family or something of the sort. Yeah, so you grew up like leaning on yourself because maybe somehow you felt that asking for help means that you're burdening others, so you just kind of internalize that and you're used to just dealing with your stuff alone, which in some ways that has showed up in my life. But anyways, that's besides the point. The manifestation of this false self and how it fronts, it's in many ways, and I cannot be able to list all of them. So again, I go back to the question: is this who you truly are? Hmm? Is this who you are, or is this who you had to become because you never felt safe? Is it who you are, or is it who you had to become because you didn't feel safe? Is it? It's so exhausting. It's so exhausting to constantly be performing for acceptance and love. So again, is it that you are a giver, or you love giving out of the kindness of your heart, or is it that you're trying to buy love? Hmm? Is it that you're trying to buy love, or is it that hey, you're actually just kind? Is it because some of these things that we defend is not really truly us, because it could be something like proud, arrogant, or avoidant, and you're like, this is who I am. Is it really who you are, or who you had to become because you never felt safe? Hmm? You are called wise beyond your years, which there's such a thing is that when you're even such a little kid and God blesses you with wisdom. Well, most of these times I would say someone is wise beyond their years is because they've had to regulate on their own, and a child shouldn't have to regulate their emotion and mentally on their own. They've had to regulate their parents, they've had to regulate the people around them, and they're like, wise beyond their years. No, it's just a child who doesn't feel safe and who's tired of performing. Alright, so I hope I've been a good teacher, and that is lesson one. Is it who you are, or is it who you had to become because you didn't feel safe? So I'm yours, Wanjiko Marioki, and Essence is also my name.